I have these incredibly tiny ears. They're like baby ears. I have these tiny ears, and I have so many things to put on them. I have my hearing aids in, and then I have the microphone, which is up here. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing. I like to keep score, so as of right now, it is technology 2, Lama 0. Okay. So thank you. Thanks to everyone for coming today. Oh, by the way, I have your book. Okay, yeah. Because I felt if I don't say something, I'm going to forget it, and then I'll walk out with it, which I have done many times. So in any case, I appreciate all of you being here this morning. Thanks so much. And for those of you who were here a few weeks ago and came in and saw a few different things, it's different for me too, except that I've been looking at the drawings of this shrine for 2 to 3 years. The building, when it was being planned, this shrine was in plan the entire time. This particular shrine with this particular layout, this particular design, and the particular statues have been in plan for a long time. And since 2023, when we actually took delivery on the 3 large statues of Vajradhara, and now see, I can't remember who's who. Okay, yeah, Chenrezig is here and Tara is here. I'll get used to it. We took delivery on them in 2023. They were made in Nepal at the request of our teacher, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. He ordered these particular statues for us, as well as the 6 statues you see on the inside row: Tilopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, Dusam Kempa, the 6 early lineage holders of our Karma Kagyu tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. So Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche ordered these, would that be 9 statues? And so they've been in plan for a very long time, but it's still very different to walk in and see it, and to see the realization of this idea that started on a Sunday, just another Sunday morning here, when our leadership got calls from authorities telling us that our building was on fire. At the time I was teaching in Mexico, I was in Jalapa, as a matter of fact, and I called somebody because I saw the email that said classes and meditation are canceled today because of a serious fire, and I'm like, oh dear. So I called and spoke to Kim Miracle, the director of the time. She's downstairs teaching Intro to Meditation right now. Thank you, Kim. And she expressed that the fire had been intentionally set, and that the building had essentially been destroyed because once the roof caught fire, it collapsed into the sanctuary, into the main meditation hall, and that was sort of the end of the building. The building could not be rescued. So we were very sad, and Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, our teacher, told Kim through the translator, don't be sad, just rebuild it. And then I saw him a month later at KTD Monastery, our home monastery in Woodstock, New York, and he said, oh, and by the way, make the next one bigger. Make the next one bigger. So we did that, and it took us, it's been 9 years, right? And so next January 31st of 2026 will be the 10th anniversary since the fire. So Rinpoche, we made it bigger. And all of the volunteers and donors and people of goodwill who prayed for us, this is the outcome of all of that generosity and effort is the shrine that you see in front of you today. And it's a bit of an adjustment, because before we had a very beautiful and ornate setting of the various individual statues, while the three main ones were in the basement waiting behind the screen there. And then a couple of weeks ago, Lama Tashi Dundub, Khenpo Urgyen Tenzin, Khenpo Sanjay, and others came here to help us fill each one of these statues with all of the mantra rolls that we had spent about a year of Saturday mornings. We 2 hours a week for, I don't know, a whole year. We made mantra rolls to go in these statues. And there's just they saved back a few of the smaller ones, because we have 2 more statues coming. And so they'll have, but they're small. And so they'll go into those smaller statues. So yes. Oh yeah, the spire. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that. I seldom, by the way, I seldom take questions from the audience while I'm speaking, but I'll do it under this condition, because usually if I take comments and stuff while I'm speaking, I have no idea where I'm going. The gray hair makes it virtually impossible. Makes it virtually impossible for me to continue a thought. Yeah, see, we both got that going on, don't we? And so it makes it virtually impossible. But in this particular case, I will definitely entertain that question. What you're seeing over here to my right, your left. Oh, what? No, my left, your right. Anyhow, over there is it's called, it has many names. I've heard it called many things in Tibetan, but the one that sticks in my memory is Ser, S-E-R, Ser, which means gold. Tok, T-O-K, which is like top, so the top, the golden top. And so this is, we would call it in American church speak, we would call that a spire. And it would go, or you could call it a steeple. Anyway, as in here's the church, here's the steeple open. Anyway, so this, whatever you call it, it has lots of significance, and I don't have all of the iconography of it memorized, but you can definitely see the lotus flower at the bottom. You can definitely see the bell shape, and you can definitely see a vase on top, which has a base, a body, and then a head. And then above that are 2 more levels. So that is a longevity vase. And so the symbolism is obvious. The longevity vase, which is on the top, is for the longevity of the Buddha's teaching in general, but this particular location in particular. And then the rest of it, I'm going to have to get some help with. It could also have the significance of wisdom, which is the symbol of the bell. The bell symbolizes wisdom, but whether that is the symbol here or it is a completely different symbol and I missed it, I'll have to check, okay? And then the lotus flower at the bottom is like the bodhisattva, the being who lives in the world but isn't stained by the world, like the lotus flower is rooted in the mud but blooms above it. So the lotus is a general symbol for the bodhisattva heart, which seeks to benefit all beings. So hopefully that's helpful. This will eventually go on top of the building. Behind it, you'll see what's called a life tree that will go inside it. It is made of cedar wood, and the cedar wood was chosen by the carpenter who formed it for us, based on instructions from Lama Tashi Dundub, who gave him the shape and how it was to be made. And then most of these life trees are inside statues. There'll be a rod made of, or a dowel made of wood, and it has to be made to a specific type of specification. And you also have to make it so that the top of it is the way the tree was growing. So they had to take this to a couple of sawyers, S-A-W-Y-E-R-S. Now there's an old word, but carpenters know it. Carpenters know this word. And it means a person who saws and creates and mills wood into lumber. So they took it to a couple of different sawyers and had them help determine which end was up. And so it's now reaching for the sky, okay? And which is good, there is a Tibetan form of feng shui, by the way. There is a Tibetan feng shui, and this is part of the, what they call the science of relative truth. It's only relative truth, but there's a science to it. And if you work with the science of relative truth, you have more harmony in your life and community and things like that. So there is a Tibetan feng shui, and it's operative here. And so that will go inside the spire when it is placed on top of the building. And the current plan is to, we've engaged the original architect for this project and the original general contractor for this project. We've engaged them, and they are planning the mount for this that will go on top of the building. So, and I don't know if it'll be a few weeks or a few months. It depends on money. You know, we're raising money right now, by the way. I would be, what is it? I would be remiss if I didn't remind people that we're raising money right now in a pledge drive, and you can go online and donate to Rinpoche's vision. And it will help to help fund these projects. The goal is 85,000, and I think we're above 40 now. So we're doing, yeah, that's right. We're 55 and counting. Yay! So anyway, so I had to make sure I got that in. This particular project will be done depending on time, money, and availability sometime this year. And then people will be able to see our Saratoga, or Golden Spire, from Route 315. And possibly from Interstate 70. Who knows, right? So I appreciate having this opportunity to share with you a little bit about the project and how it came to be, and how it is part of a larger vision that Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche had of rebuilding and making the new one bigger. And then all of you come and bring your goodness and sincerity here, and you meditate in this place. And the goodness and sincerity that you bring here remains after you leave, and it blesses this place. And so I always love coming in here after people have been meditating here, because it just feels really nice in here. And having the consecrated images of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas here is incredibly inspiring. And that, I think, is the main function of iconography in Buddhism and elsewhere, is this upliftment, the uplifting of ourselves by viewing artistic renderings of, in this case, enlightenment. And that's why I named the talk today, What Does Enlightenment Look Like? Because we who grew up not knowing anything, perhaps, about Buddhism, very few people grow up knowing much about Buddhism other than what they read in articles or in the media, or if they read. Like I was a child, we didn't have the internet. We had magazines and newspapers mainly, and books, but we had, we did have the capacity to look things up in the encyclopedia. It was the Wikipedia before Wikipedia. It was paper books that contained the world's knowledge, and that was where I first read about Buddhism and enlightenment. And I gotta be honest with you, the Book of Knowledge, which was one of the many companies that put out encyclopedias after World War II in order to make the next generation geniuses. We were all supposed to read these encyclopedias and become geniuses. It didn't necessarily happen, but it was a great idea. It also sold them lots of books. The entries on Buddhism didn't really inspire me much, but it's where I first encountered Buddhism. And I can still remember the little illustration of the Buddha giving a teaching. That was all I remember. That and the fact that it seemed that Buddhism was quite gloomy because it was all about suffering and death. And then, of course, then I went to catechism class and learned about Catholicism, and it was all about suffering and death. So, so I guess it wasn't that different. But in any case, learning about Dharma and coming to understand Dharma, one of the most difficult concepts for us is enlightenment. It's the thing we talk about a lot in Buddhism. We talk about enlightenment. In fact, from now until enlightenment is reached, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, which I totally forgot to do again. We did it. Okay, just think real hard. Okay. It says, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. So now we've been talking about it for a long time, but what is it? And how does it manifest? And what does it mean to be an enlightened being? And it's the next two lines are, by the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. So when we think about enlightenment, the word for it in Tibetan is Jangchup, and that's like J-A-N-G, Jang. And then the second word is Chub, C-H-U-B. Sometimes it's a B in English, and sometimes it's a P in English, because it depends on what part of Tibet you're talking about, which dialect. But in any case, Jang Chub means enlightenment. And interestingly enough, the derivation of the words is very similar to the word for Buddha, which is Sang, S-A-N-G, Gye, G-Y-E in Tibetan. Sangye and Jangchup have the same meaning. So they both mean, the first syllable means purification. Purification. The second one means full ripening. Purification, ripening. Purification, ripening. So this refers to the process of becoming a Buddha. It is the purification of all of our obstacles and obscurations, all of our negativities. It's the purification of all of our bad habits. It's the purification of every bad thing we have ever done. This lifetime, all lifetimes. Imagine what life would be like if we could suddenly clear that slate. No grudges against ourselves. How would that feel? How would it feel to be free from all of the negative habits that we find so difficult and that make our relationships so complicated? Knee-jerk reactions that we just can't seem to get rid of. Resentments, jealousy, anger, competitiveness, hurt. How would it be if those were all purified? Meaning that we would still experience emotions, but they wouldn't kill us emotionally. We would still have these feelings, but they wouldn't knock us down a well of sadness. If we could experience life like that without knee-jerk reactions and causing hurt for ourselves and hurt for others, how would that be? That's an amazing idea. I like the idea. Sign me up. Because that's what the Sang or the Jang of these words mean. Complete purification. Then ripening. Complete ripening. What are we ripening? What's going on with that? Well, this comes back to what I jokingly call the good news of Buddhism. And the good news of Buddhism is that all of us have a mind. I know that's not news. We all have a mind, but the mind that we have is more special than we could ever imagine. Right now, our minds exist in our understanding as a thought machine, churning all the time, churning things out, churning out good thoughts, churning out bad thoughts, churning out pain and suffering, churning out everything, like wild ideas. Like, why did that thing happen? Wild ideas. I have a wild idea as to why that happened, you know. Why did that person say that to me? Wild ideas. So that's how we know our mind right now, as the thought generator and the idea generator. I mean, it's what has enabled some of us to actually make a living from ideas and from problem solving. I mean, our minds has been a very useful thing. But interestingly enough, that's not all it is. It's not just an idea generator. It's not just a problem solver. It actually is more. And how do we know that this is more, that there's more? One of my teachers, His Eminence Tai Situ Rinpoche, said, we get an idea that there may be more to us than meets the eye when something touches us to our core, when we see art and experience art, whether that art is visual art, song, music, if it's dance, anything that moves us to our core, he said, is evidence that that the mind is more than just a thought machine. Because he said the fact that we can be touched by anything indicates that there is something beautiful and deathless inside of us that can be brought forward and ripened. And so once again I said, sign me up. He said this idea of being touched, you know, and interesting, we're coming up on, this is a little side conversation. We're coming up at the end of this month to our 5th anniversary celebration of our 5th anniversary of participating in Kosai Science Festival. Columbus KTC participates every year in the Kosai Science Festival with evening programs for adults on meditation. They're done here, and a brain scientist and I sit and do a two-person TED Talk. It's a blast. We have a good time. I was her lab rat, and she was my scientist, and we got to be friends. And so we're going to talk about that. She gave a talk last year on the power of awe, A-W-E, awe. And that is also what that being touched at our core is. It's awe. When we're in nature, we feel that there is something greater than ourselves at work. And she said of all of the types of beauty that can inspire awe, she said scientific studies have been done on the various types of awe. And she said, you know what is the most inspiring? Moral beauty. Moral beauty. The fact that beings can help each other and rescue each other and benefit each other. Seeing moral beauty inspires us in ways that art cannot. Isn't that fascinating? So the reason I'm bringing all this up is to talk about the ripening of this unnamed something that's within us. And of course, we're very parochial in this tradition. We call it Buddha nature. Everybody has Buddha nature. And the word Buddha just means awakening, awakening. And it's, and from the point of view of the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, who was Prince Siddhartha until he came to a dissatisfaction with his royal luxury life and realizing that there was something more, he decided to leave his palace and go looking for it. And through the practice of deep meditation, he discovered his own inner nature, his own inner sanity, his own inner goodness, and he saw that it was limitless, that mind was limitless, and that the thoughts, feelings, and emotion that the mind churns out is just, I guess you could call it flotsam and jetsam on the ocean of the mind. And that the real value of the mind lies beneath that surface and lies with our basic goodness, our basic sanity, our basic goodness, which is how some people have translated Buddha nature as basic sanity and goodness. And so from the Buddha's point of view, everybody has a core of sanity and goodness. No matter how much malevolence and difficulty and badness they show, their core is still this mind that has as its nature basic sanity and goodness. But I don't know about you, but I don't often experience my inner sanity and goodness. I don't often experience that. Sure, I'll have these fleeting moments where beauty overcomes me and I do feel touched. But most of the time, it's that churning thought machine that takes my attention away. And this is the function of meditation, no matter what kind of meditation you're talking about. This is the function of all of the Buddhist forms of meditation, is to reduce the static in the mind and allow all that flotsam and jetsam to dissipate so that one can see below the surface and see our basic sanity and goodness. And once we see it, then we want to begin to live from that place of sanity and goodness. It becomes very attractive, and we want to actualize it so that it's there all the time. Right now, we only get little glimpses of it, but what if? What if we could be with our basic goodness 24/7? Wouldn't that be amazing? And that is what I think of when I think of enlightenment. Complete wisdom, complete compassion, 24/7. And this idea of expressing that and living from that place rather than from our confusion and delusion. Wow, what an attractive idea. And that's what the iconography of enlightenment expresses to us. So it took me a minute to get here, but this is why you see what you see when you see images of the Buddha. Also, images of bodhisattvas. Bodhi means awakened. And again, let's go back and say, what did Prince Siddhartha awaken to? He awakened to his basic nature of sanity and goodness. But even more than that, he awakened to the process of uncovering one's sanity and goodness. Because if I was told, hey, you have basic sanity and goodness, I would probably go online and look it up. Maybe there's a YouTube on it somewhere, for how to find my sanity and goodness. I mean, I'd look it up. I would ask the experts. I'd read books and stuff. But that's not how it's done. It's done by quieting the noise and allowing mind to experience itself and awaken itself to its own nature. So that seems a little tough. Awakening to my own nature? Oh my goodness, how, I don't know. I may need help with that. And this is what all the teachings are for. And this is why the teachers are here, to help us find our path to our sanity and our goodness. Because we each have a slightly different path, because we all have a similar Buddha nature, but how we reach it is going to be different for each individual, because we each have our own, I like to call it our individual style of confusion. our individual style of confusion. I have specific style of confusion. You have your own. You have your own. We all have our specific style of confusion. And the practices work on dispelling those. And when those are dispelled, what is naturally there is shown. And that's why it's called ripening. It's called ripening because it's not importing something. When Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche first started teaching about Buddha nature, he said, no, you're not like importing qualities from somewhere else. You have these already inside you. You just don't know they're there. And then he gave this quote that I will never forget. He said, if you only knew who you really were and what you were capable of, he said, you would be astonished and amazed. And I'm like, once again, sign me up, So that's that's how I became a Buddhist, to try to find that inner nature and to try to live from that place. And also to awaken to that nature, but also to awaken to the process of confusion. Because if we understand how our confusion starts, then we're going to be able to see how that confusion ends. Does that make sense? I'm going to talk about something that's going to seem off topic, and now I'm in trouble because I'm going to have to come back and finish the rest of this next time. But anyway, it's all right. It happens like that sometimes. I had so much to say at the beginning, I made myself late. In any case, because I do want there to be time for discussion. I attended a teaching many, many years ago by a Lama who looked so frail and so elderly that I thought a strong wind might blow him away. His name was Kalu Rinpoche. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, the Kalu Rinpoche I know is young and vital. And it's like, yes, that's his reincarnation. But the old guy, the guy I met, was just this tiny little man who had spent almost 12 plus years in retreat, just like the great yogi Milarepa. And he was forced to come out of it by his guru, who said, you got to go start teaching people. So he came to America and taught us. It's amazing. The way he said is, look, we have Buddha nature, but we don't know it. And because we don't know it, it's like it doesn't exist. And that is the first of the problems we face. He called it the 4 veils that cover our Buddha nature. The first one is not knowing we have it. Makes sense. And when you don't know you have it, he said, then you make the second mistake, which is that you posit or theorize that there is a me or I who's experiencing all these things. And that me or I is separate from every other me and I, and different and possibly better than all of the other me's and I's. And we cling to that concept of self. So it starts with not knowing, basic ignorance, and then it follows with the habitual tendency to think that there's a me. And once there's a me, there's others. Once there's a self, there's others, and then we have the third veil, which is drama. I'm sorry, it's not drama, but it's what happens. When there's self and other, there's drama, because self tries to conquer other and it becomes messy. I mean, any of the soap operas on TV, daytime or evening, will tell you that. So it's mental affliction, the veil of mental afflictions that arise in response to self and other. So now we're down to that. The basic mistake of not knowing we have Buddha nature and not knowing we have it, we then theorize that the person who's thinking all this is not a Buddha, but rather me. And then that creates other instantaneously. So now we have the drama of mental afflictions, which keeps us very busy. I mean, we're not going to look inside as long as we got an outside enemy to fight. I mean, busy, busy, busy. We have friends to protect and enemies to defeat. Oh, I mean, we're never going to run out of drama. And then, on top of that, we act on it. We don't just think about it, we act on it. And that produces the fourth veil, which is karmic accumulation. We accumulate what the Buddha called karmic impressions. Or some people, some of the Buddhist texts refer to karma as being like seeds planted in the ground. Other people think of them as like impressions made in clay. They're all imperfect examples, but the idea is once we actually complete an action, we think about it, we start it, we finish it, and we're happy about it, that actually makes an impression on us that then forms our personality. And that is how we don't know. This is why we don't know we have Buddha nature and how it stays hidden from us. Because we're so darn busy trying to maintain this sense of self and the whole construct. And the first inkling that there's something more will happen to us when we are touched by moral or artistic beauty or natural beauty. And then slowly we have the sense that there's more, and we begin to seek, and we begin to meet teachers, and then meeting teachers, we learn methods, and learning methods, we begin to actually practice them, and we begin to gradually remove these veils by thinning them out through our practice of meditation and our practice of virtue, because remember this, the merit of generosity and other good deeds. We accumulate virtuous mind states through generosity and ethics and patience. And then it becomes easier and easier. These veils become thinner and thinner until finally we begin to see how things really are. And this is what enlightenment is this complete purification of all complexity, the complete dispelling of the four veils, and the ripening of the qualities, the innate qualities of sanity and goodness that were always there. Which is why I say The Wizard of Oz is a Buddhist book. Because Dorothy doesn't have to go very far to find out that she had all of those qualities she was looking for all along. And there's no place like home. There's no place like the home we have in our mind. And we can reach that through the practice of meditation. So that's what enlightenment is, how enlightenment is defined. And these images are made so that they reflect all of the qualities that we have inside us. You will see the three main images of Vajradhara Buddha, which is a form of Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha, and Chenrezig and Tara. You will see that they are wearing crowns like royalty, and they're dressed like ancient Indian royalty with silks and jewels and bangles and everything. I mean, there are 13 different sets of ornaments worn by what they call the Sambhogakaya, or the body of enjoyment. These forms of the Buddha, these sort of uplifted forms of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, have 13 different ornaments. And these 13 different ornaments correspond to the 13 levels of awakening that are spoken about in the Tantras. There are 11 talked about in the Mahayana, but in the Tantras, in the Sutras, there are 11 levels of awakening, but in the Tantras, there are 13. And that's why we see these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas wearing these 13 ornaments, because they have fully ripened all of their qualities. And so when we see them, we may not understand what all of those symbolize. We may have no idea. But we feel something. And Eric Weinberg last week, he mentioned this using the tuning fork analogy in his Dharma talk last week. You know, when there are two tuning forks, this is how pianos and other instruments are tuned. They have pure sound. The tuning forks are created so they have pure, identical sounds. So if you have two tuning forks tuned to A, for example, and you strike one, and you even hold it close to the other one, it begins to vibrate. This scientific sympathetic vibration is part of how the world works. Well, if that's how the world works, then seeing these images can actually cause a resonance within us that is unspoken and not really understood. But we feel good in the presence of these images, not even understanding we don't even have to understand what the symbolism is. We just feel something. We feel relaxed, or we feel uplifted. We feel like something is possible. We feel possibility. And then that makes us curious, because all of our styles of confusion entail curiosity. And so as we become curious, we learn more, and as we learn more, we practice, and as we practice, we come to understand from an experiential point of view, not just an intellectual point of view. So this is as far as I can go today, because if I were to go on any further, I might put people to sleep, which has happened. It has happened. And I don't want anybody to have to go through that, because, we have to pick you up off the floor, and it's, a little embarrassing. But the point of it is that this is just sort of the first part of this talk. The second part, we'll talk about specific Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the specific symbolism. I'll give you like a short course in that. But just start by knowing that all of the ornaments that they're wearing symbolize the innate qualities that we already have, that don't have to be imported from elsewhere. So, okay. Whew. I think I should let you guys talk. So if you have questions, comments, whatever, you can use the question mics, or if you're, do we monitor questions online? I don't know. No, okay, yeah, all right. Oh, that's right, yeah, we don't, yeah, need to do that. Thoughts, questions, yes?
So a couple questions about the shrine.
Yes.
What's going to be above the Mahakala, and on the other side there's a cabinet similar to where we have the texts over here. Could you talk about what's going in there too?
Oh, sure. Yeah. To describe, I'll talk about the texts first. To talk about the text, we need to talk about the two cabinets that are at the extremity, the right and left extremity of the shrine. These contain books. Now, frequently in traditional Tibetan shrines, these books are on the top. But because we have, the shrine isn't as tall as it could be, I wanted to put them on the side so they weren't as distracting. It's just, it's an aesthetic choice. So I put them on the side. And the texts, there are usually two encyclopedias. There are two sets of texts generally, but you can have more. If you have more shelf space, you can have more texts. Because if you look at the all-over design of a shrine, it should have three things. It should represent the Buddha's body, the Buddha's speech, and the Buddha's mind. Okay? So the body, speech, and mind. And so the body, of course, is all the various forms of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. That's the body. The speech is the text, the texts. And then the mind is usually symbolized by a reliquary, a relic case that contains a relic of the Buddha or of other Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, or masters. And so we have all three of these here. But the text, to come back to the topic of the texts, the two main ones that we use are the Kangyur, which is, ka is like the Tibetan word for word. It's the Tibetan word for word, ka, Or those of you who are learning the alphabet, ka. Tibetan's a tonal language, and so the first letter of the alphabet is ka. So it's an up sound. And the next one is ka. It's a middle sound. Anyhow, it's spelled differently too. But anyway, but these are the words of the Buddha. So it's the sutras and all of the actual words of the Buddha and all the teachings, the actual teachings of the Buddha in book form. It's all in Tibetan. These are special texts that are like 22 inches long. And Tibetan books are not bound, but that's why they are wrapped in fabric. At the end, they're often displayed this way, not lengthwise, but on edge, so that the end flap, which is where the title is located, can be seen. And these are not in any particular order. There actually is an order, and they need to be reordered because they're in an order. We just wholesale put them up there, you know. But they'll be reordered eventually in the proper order. But so that they could actually be used as reference if people wanted to try to look something up. At KTD, they did a smart thing. They put the big ones in the actual shrine room, and then they actually have a reference set in their library. So the other set of texts, which would be on this side if we had them, is called the Tanjur, which has to do with the commentaries that have been written on the words of the Buddha. So all the commentaries would be on the other side. And there are many more of those than there are of the Kanjur because it takes a lot to explain the words of the Buddha. Khenpo Karthar told Lama Karma Drodro to give us his set of the Kanjur, and now we have to order a set of Tenjur. So we'll have to get that over time. We had a partial set of the Tanjur, a Tenjur, excuse me, and they're, in fact, they're still at somebody's house because they had smoke damage from the other place. So, but then your other question was not just about the text. It was about which? What's going to be above the Maha? What's going to be, okay, right. Yeah, well, yeah, we have one uninhabited set of cabinets. I mean, there's a clutch of different statuary in this one. And over here we have the thousand-armed Chenrezig. And above him is Amitabha Buddha, who is the guru of Chenrezig. That's how they're usually depicted in iconography, Chenrezig, and then above his head is depicted the Buddha Amitabha, who is his guru. And so we're going to do the same thing for Mahakala. And by the way, you're going to see one little switch because we made a mistake. Oopsie. We put the thousand-armed Chenrezig and Amitabha over here, but they actually go over here on Tara. They're on the other side of Tara. And Mahakala, the protector, will go over here. It's people ask, well, who's Mahakala? And I say, well, you know, think Saint Michael the Archangel, only he's kind of like, he's Himalayan, you know, kind of fierce. So anyway, so he will be over here. And above his head will be Karmapakshi, the second Karmapa, who was the very first Tulku of Tibet, the first reincarnate master of Tibet, but also Mahakala, the two-armed Mahakala, was his family protector. And so when he became the head of this lineage, his family protector became the protector of the entire Karmakaju. And so that's why he's visualized or seen above the head of Mahakala. In Thangka paintings, that's usually, and so I decided I'd just go classical. Even though the meaning is going to be lost on a lot of people, I just thought I would go for that. Thanks. Yeah. By the way, I got your email. Thanks very much. He sent me a great email this week, and I'm going to talk to you about it in a bit. No, I won't have time today. We'll do it next time.
Thank you, Lama Kathy.
Yeah.
Given the times and the word idol and idolatry, other belief systems see them as bad. Yeah. So is the word statue a more acceptable word?
Mm-hmm. You know, I'll tell you what, thanks for asking this question, because this actually came up today in another conversation I was having, so I'm really glad you asked it. Because I was giving a short Dharma talk to Athens KTC, and they say hi, by the way. They had their quiet sitting meditation and Dharma discussion today in Athens. But this came up because you're absolutely right in that there are some faith traditions that don't like representations being made of their holy figures. And it may actually sort of not surprise you to know that Buddhism started out the same way. The Buddha did not want depictions of himself, and so there were no Buddha statues at first. But people being people, we're people. We need something to relate to. We need something to relate to. So it began with 2 footprints, large ones, large footprints that were on a circle. Impressions made in clay or in earth or in stone, and carved in stone. And people, that was the representation of the Buddha, was just those 2 feet, those 2 footprints. And people threw flowers on it as a way of honoring the Buddha and his memory. But then we have a complicated thing, and that is that before the Buddha died, he instructed that his ashes from his cremation be parceled out to 8 different places. I don't know if he picked 8, but he just said places where significant things happened in his life so that people could go visit those places, because people asked him, "Oh, great master, how do we remember you when you're gone? How do we think of you when you're not here?" He said, "Go to these places. Go to these places." And then he arranged for his ashes to be placed in mounds there, reliquaries. And they started out as just mounds, but then they became structures, and then they eventually became the reliquaries that we know today as in Tibetan tradition as Chu Ten, Choten, Chu Ten, or Dharma support. And so that is where the reliquary idea came from. So even though the Buddha did not want representations of himself, nevertheless he had his ashes placed so that they could be a focus for veneration. And I got a big help with this because I got a big help with this from a friend of mine who's Catholic, who said there's a difference in Catholicism between worship and veneration. And I grew up Catholic and I didn't know this. So I was delighted to learn this. Because, in Catholicism, there is a class of holy beings who are not God, but who are venerated, and they call them saints. Saints. And so you could say that since the Buddha denied being divine, he denied divinity. He said he's not God. He's just a person who attained enlightenment. He's not ordinary. He's not divine. He's enlightened, right in the middle. You leave it to him. He's a middle path kind of guy. So that's who he said he was. And so Catholicism really helped me to explain this to other people, because these saintly people are not God, but we venerate their example. And what I often say is that we venerate a lot of people, because there's a lot of statues everywhere. I mean, you go to Port Columbus and you see, who do you see at Port Columbus? There's a statue there. Who is it? It's Jerry Mock, who went the first woman to finish what Amelia Earhart started, going solo around the world. And she's depicted holding a globe, I think. So I mean, it's like her memory is venerated, so to speak. It's not that she was a holy being, but we want to remember her. And so we just kind of do it up special. We do it up special. We could just have settled for the 2 footprints, but no. We being people, we have to dress it up and make it more than it is. But then, since all of these are drawn on a specific mathematical grid, so that each part of the body is in perfect symmetry to the rest of the body, that's part of what makes it let us relax. Lets us relax. Isn't that wild? I appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lama Kathy.
Yeah.
You've made simplicity out of complexity.
Yeah, I tell you, thank you. It's nice to know that this 4-year degree in journalism got me somewhere. Yeah, this will be the last question. Yeah, you can just pull it, yeah.
This question of mine might sound like it's full of grasping, but you were talking about, the path. And this week I've been I asked myself a lot of questions about where am I on the path? Or am I on the path at all? some days it doesn't feel like I am on the path, and it's full of confusions. It's full of, trying to get rid of bad habits and realizing that you couldn't even stand your own clarity and being with yourself. And so how do you know? And how do you find that motivations and believe that you move forward?
I really appreciate this question. This is a really good question, because I think all of us ask ourselves that. All of us, myself included, everybody. We all wonder, like, how am I doing? Am I? And I think that, based on your question, I think it's very clear that you are on a path. And I think I read an essay once by a spiritual teacher from the Christian tradition. And he said, all of us are on a spiritual journey, whether we know it or not. And the ones who have the better spiritual journey are the ones that recognize that they are on a spiritual journey, and they start to cooperate with their journey. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because he says everybody's on a spiritual journey, they just don't know it, right? Everybody is on a spiritual journey, they just don't know they are. But the people who know they are on one, at least they're ahead of the game. They're ahead of it, right? So the very fact that you are trying and working on the journey, that's a good sign. That's a very good sign. And the other thing that's a good sign is that recognizing that you have good days and bad days. That's also a good sign, because it's not a good sign if a person says, "Oh yes, everything is going really well all the time, and I am great." Then we can kind of like have a little doubt about such a person, because maybe they aren't really being honest, right? So the fact that we have good days and bad days means that we know what is right and what is not right for us. We know how we want to be and how we don't want to be. And so my teacher said, he said, every day, he said, when you wake up, he said, you can begin your day by thinking, I woke up today. Wow, I'm alive. How wonderful. And then he said, you can think, I take refuge in the Buddha as my guide, and his Dharma as my guide, and his community as my guide, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, so that even if I have a difficult day today, at least I have taken refuge in the morning. And then he said, you can make offerings to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in your mind, even if you don't have an altar. He said you can make offerings of every beautiful thing to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha in your mind when you wake up. Then he says if you have time, you can meditate a little bit. Then, after you meditate a little bit, he said you dedicate the goodness of your morning Buddhist practice, which may only be 5 minutes long, but you did it, right? Then you go through your day, and he said you can make some notes as you go through the day. Oh, I did that, and I did that right. Hooray, I rejoice. And like that, I didn't do so well. Oh, I regret that. So rejoicing and regretting. He said that's mindfulness at work, right? Then in the evening, he said you can think that you're in front of the Buddha and you tell him about your day. Okay, Buddha, this went really well. I want to do more of that. This did not go very well. I want to do less of that. And then you take refuge again, the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and then you go to sleep. And he said, when you do this, he said, you're falling asleep like in the lap of the Buddha. You're just with this idea of the gentle protection of the Buddha. And so I think that we are all on this path. So that's for sure. We're all on the path. And I love that my teacher gave a little practice I could do every day. And that way, no matter what's happening, we are slowly getting better. Why? Because we are aware and rejoicing in the good things we do and are regretting the things that we do that aren't so good. So slowly, we'll do less of those things that aren't so good and more of those things that are. Does that make sense?
That's the goal.
That's how to advance on the path. So does that help?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. Well, thanks to everyone. Thank you for being here and just bringing your spiritual path here. It's nice. We're a little way station. Plus, we have snacks. Yeah, a way station for beings on the path. And by the way, I have to say a shout out to all of the people who serve in the kitchen every week. I have to tell you, those people are amazing, and it's wonderful that they feed people who are doing Dharma practice. Because, even if our meditation, sometimes we sit and we meditate and we're not having a good day, but we're trying, right? Well, even if we're trying, feeding us is good karma. So if you want to get some good karma, you can volunteer and help the people in the kitchen, because feeding people is really good karma. And the other thing that's really a good thing to volunteer to do is to be the greeters in the front, because you are the first person that somebody meets. And you may think that you're not like the best representative of meditation or the best representation of the path, but that's okay. You are the one that they had the karma to meet. So slowly, you can also help other people feel welcome and help other people feel just folded in, So anyway, sorry, more commercials. Let's dedicate merit. We'll recite this in English and think that we dedicate all the goodness to all sentient beings. And it begins with the words, by this merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is. Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path. I completely dedicate all this virtue. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for coming. We'll see you next time. Drive safely. And thank you to the sound department.